Something truly shocking happened at the Academy Awards tonight, and we have seen mishaps with envelopes. In the 1970s, there was a streaker on stage. Wild things have happened at this show. I can't remember ever reading, learning, watching, or hearing about anything quite like this. At approximately 7:30 p.m. Pacific time, Chris Rock came out to present the Oscar for Best Documentary. He made a few jokes at the expense of audience members before turning his attention to Jada Pinkett Smith when he said this.
Jada, I love you. G.I. Jane 2, can't wait to see it. All right? That was a nice one. Okay. I'm out here. Richard. Oh, wow. Will Smith just smacked the shit out of me.
Keep my wife's name out your fucking mouth.
Wow, dude.
Yes.
It was a G.I. Jane joke.
Keep my wife's name out your fucking mouth.
I'm going to, okay? Okay.
This was authentically shocking, breathtaking, confounding, confusing. As you can tell, there was stunned silence at the Dolby Theater. Joanna, what did you think when all this was happening?
Well, so we got the edited version at home, right? And so at first, I think the first reaction was us trying to figure out if it was a bit or if it was real, because a lot of the yelling was edited out. And so it came down to, did we think the slap was real? You could read Will Smith's lips. They muted the audio, but you could read it. And mostly I was going off of Lupita Nyong'o's reaction behind him because she looked like it wasn't a bit. And so then I started messaging people I knew who were in the theater, and all of them were at the bar and didn't even know that it had happened. And then that unedited audio that we just heard started going around, and it became really clear that it was a real thing that happened. And then we were sort of just braced for the next, 20, 30 minutes between that slap and when we knew Will Smith would take the stage to give his speech. So that was sort of my reaction. What was yours?
I was bewildered. I think for a hot second, I thought it might have been a prank or a bit, an attempt to breathe some life into what had been a moribund and quite confusing 2.5 hours of award ceremony. And very quickly, it became clear just from following along on Twitter that there were some reporters in the room who explained that this was in fact quite real, or if it was a staged prank, that it was extremely elaborate and intensely executed. So Matt Belloni, who's hosting a podcast on the Ringer Podcast Network called The Town, recently launched. He's also a founder of Puck Media, was there. And we're going to call Matt so that Matt can tell us exactly what it was like in the room before we talk about our reactions to this crazy moment. Okay, Matt, so you were there when all of this began to transpire. When you saw Will Smith step onto the stage, what was your reaction, and what was the reaction of the room at the Dolby?
Wait, you're having me on to talk about this? I thought you wanted my thoughts on Liza Minnelli giving Best Picture. So that was a moment. No. Okay. So honestly, it was normal. You know, Chris Rock did his joke. I didn't think twice about it. You see Will Smith coming up on stage, you assume it's a bit, right? You assume that they're friends, they worked something out, and, you know, he's going to fake being upset about the G.I. Jane 2 joke. And then all of a sudden, you see him take a swing at him. And I was like, oh, this is kind of a, hefty bit here. And the way Chris Rock was reacting, it did not look like a bit. It looked like he was genuinely surprised by what happened. And then Will Smith starts walking away, and Chris Rock is like trying to compose himself. And he's like, I'm going to paraphrase here, but he's like, I just got punched on stage by Will Smith. Like, it's almost like he's saying it to himself. He couldn't believe it.
Yeah.
And so was there a hushed silence in the crowd? Were people laughing? What was the energy like?
Oh, no, it went from like normal, comedy bit, and then it went to absolute stunned silence. Not like people whispering what's going on, but it was stunned silence. Like, I looked right, I looked left. People were just like, their mouths were open. And this, keep in mind, I was there during the Moonlight La La Land fiasco, and people were surprised then. This was another level because we didn't know what to think. We didn't know if it was fake, if it was real. And then Will Smith started screaming from his seat. And that's when I knew, okay, this is not fake.
So obviously Chris Rock stumbled a bit in the aftermath of that. And it seemed pretty clear by the time he presented the Best Documentary Award that this was not staged whatsoever. But then there's this 20 to 30 minute period between Will getting his Best Actor Oscar. And we were seeing on Twitter that there were apparently publicists huddling around Will, that Will was huddled up with, I think, Denzel Washington at one point, maybe Tyler Perry. What was happening inside the room at that point, as far as you could tell?
I mean, after the whole thing transpired and, the Best Documentary Award was given out, which, by the way, Chris Rock looked absolutely frazzled. Like, he couldn't even get the words out. He went at one point he said, we're going to give away a documentary, not the awards. And after that, people were just like, did that just happen? Like, what just happened there? And there was still a little bit of like, I can't believe that's real. But I think once we all heard Will yelling from his seat, it was clear that he was actually really pissed. And then when we saw the handlers and the PR people and Denzel get involved, it was very clear that this was not some kind of a bit. And I texted someone from someone close to the show, and I was like, that wasn't in rehearsals, was it? And they're like, no. So that's when I knew.
Right. Yeah. And what was it like, in the commercial breaks or all of the downtime between that moment and then when Will has to get up? And we at home are sitting there going, what is he going to say in his speech, possibly to follow this? What was it like in the room for all of you sitting in there?
It was like, why are we even watching this? Why do we care about this anymore? Like, what is he going to say? I mean, I turned to the guy sitting next to me and was like, I can't believe they're just going about this as normal. Like, Will was just sitting there. He wasn't like asked to step to the side or leave or anything like that. And, I'm not saying he should have been arrested or anything. I don't know the details there, but I do think that they probably should have had someone come out and like maybe take him off to the side and like say, hey, this is a big deal. Like, we can't have you just sitting there. And then you got to think that they were just probably waiting for the Best Actor trophy, which everybody knew he was going to win.
Well, let's talk about the Best Actor trophy, because on the one hand, there was something very moving about the vulnerability that Will Smith showed, but also extremely confusing about the way that he was presenting it, and a little bit uncomfortable, honestly, about the way that the incident was positioned within the speech. What was the energy like after he won? Because in the run-up to this show, obviously, I would say the anticipation for his eventual win was probably the number one thing on most people's checklist. So when he won Best Actor, what was it like?
Yeah, I mean, you got to understand that these speeches are very manicured. When you got to this point, you're going to win. He had a speech ready, and it probably involved a lot about Richard Williams and what he did for his daughters and family. And, Will Smith's publicist was in his ear during the commercial breaks. And I got to imagine that either together or with her or him on his own decided to tweak it to incorporate this incident. And he gave kind of a half speech where it was half about Richard Williams and what he did for his family, but then also kind of equating it without directly saying it to what he did in quote unquote protecting his wife, Jada. And that's where I think it got a little bit off the rails, because we were like, wait a second, like, okay, so you're equating what Richard Williams did in nurturing and being hard charging with his daughters to literally jumping on stage and slapping a dude because you didn't like the joke about his wife. And I don't know. I just, then he apologized, but he didn't apologize to Chris Rock. He apologized to his fellow nominees and to the Academy for sort of becoming the story and the sideshow there. I don't know. I mean, I guess you're doing it on the fly, but it came across very bizarre.
And what was the reaction in the room? Because, like the way the camera is showing us the audience, we're seeing mostly people standing up and cheering. It was cutting to Denzel a lot, all of that. But I also saw some people like Nicole Kidman or Cody Smith-McPhee, a couple people who were like right in front who looked still just really like shook and uncomfortable.
Yeah, I don't know what they were showing on TV, but in the room, people were still kind of muted. When he won, there was applause. But I would say it was not the kind of applause you would hear from an actor of Will Smith's stature who has won his first Oscar after a 30-year career that he's had. You would think this would have been a coronation ovation, and it was nice. There were people clapping, but there were a lot of people not clapping.
Matt, we're going to have a lot of time to unpack the ramifications, the utter weirdness of that moment. Obviously, I'm sure you'll be breaking it down on The Town this week. Thanks for joining us so briefly after the show, and we'll see you soon. Okay, well, Joanna, I am having a hard time sorting through some of my feelings about this. I don't feel good about watching one person get assaulted on stage. That
No.
doesn't sit right. It was a very weird reaction. Will Smith made reference in his speech to the fact that when you are a person who is having a career and a life like he has, you learn to endure what he described as disrespect. I think in the case of Chris Rock, he's of course a comedian and an artist in his own right. And Chris Rock is, someone who does not pull punches, so to speak. And there was reference made to the Oscars 5 or 6 years ago when Rock hosted and Jada Smith Pinkett boycotted that show, and she boycotted it during the Oscars So White boycott. And he made a joke at her expense at that point too. And there was insinuation that Smith did not forget that comment that Rock had made, and then that might have been at the root of this still very baffling decision. I'll just say one thing. Will Smith is insanely famous. He is literally among the 10 most famous people in all of Hollywood, meaning he is one of the few hundred most famous people in the world. And he has been in situations in which he has been insulted, his family's been insulted quite a bit. So there's something baffling about what happened here. What is your reaction as you're trying to sort through it now?
Yeah, to add some extra maybe ringer dish context to all of this, I think we talked about how Will Smith has run a textbook campaign up to, I would say, that moment. And part of it was, a memoir he put out this year. Part of it was, some very personal stuff about his marriage with Jada that's been out there, that was referenced in the opening monologue, and they didn't seem to respond well to those jokes. And I think, and in case people don't know, the reason Jada Smith's head is shaven is because she's got alopecia, which she's been very open about. So there's like a medical reason why her head is shaved. I'm not casting any judgment on whether or not the joke was appropriate or not, but that's just some of the context. And so I think that I've never seen anything like it. And I'm hesitant to have like a scorching hot take. We are like minutes out from the close of the ceremony right now as we're recording. But something that someone messaged me before we started recording was that they were troubled by some of the language in Will Smith's speech, however intentionally planned and calculated it was between commercial breaks, because it couched this act of violence in the language of love, which is sort of a classic abusers kind of language that they use to justify love. And especially also, this is an Oscars where we've been, an Oscar season where we've been really talking a lot about toxic masculinity as it relates to Power of the Dog. So it's just sort of like, there's a lot in the stew here. I've seen a wide range of reactions to it. For some people, Will's speech, which they gave him a lot of time to give, they kept cutting over to the Williams sisters. He seemed to be genuinely crying, which, I think he probably was. For a lot of people, that was mollifying. And then for others, they're like, I can't believe we watched someone assault someone on television, then gave him a big shiny prize for it. So I feel in limbo. I don't know. How are you feeling?
Yeah, I'm bewildered. I don't know. I mean, honestly, there's something really funny about it. It's obviously horrifying that he struck someone on stage, but also in the real world, sometimes that does happen. You might be in a bar and someone might say something to a person you're with and you might get into a fight. And that's not justifying the action.
Yeah.
It's more just setting the terms. Obviously, when you're this famous and when you're on literally the biggest pop culture event, the biggest night in Hollywood, it's ridiculous. And I don't condone the action by any stretch of the imagination, but it is so absurd as to seem fake. It's so crazy that our first instincts, both of our first instincts, were that this is a prank. And in fact, it involved a comedian. So even more so, we would think it was a prank. I don't, on the one hand, it's not even worth trying to figure out what Will Smith was thinking. I think when you are that famous and you are in like the pressure cooker of life, and also you are making an attempt to be a kind of radically open famous person, and between Red Table Talks and the memoir that you cited, the Smith family has been engaged in the last few years in this kind of like radical openness about their bonds and the strain on their bonds at times. This is something that, like, if you listen to Higher Learning, you've heard Van and Rachel talk about this before on the show. There's something they're on a mission of some kind to unpack their feelings. And sometimes when you do that all the time, you're more raw and exposed. And this just felt like an extremely raw and exposed reaction at perhaps the time when the lights were absolutely brightest. So I'm just kind of left not knowing what to think.
And I think also the converse is true when you have, I mean, award seasons are exhausting. And when you are Will Smith and you have hit every note perfectly for a year, I don't know, however long you want to call this award season, it felt like a year. You know, I can understand. Denzel gave Will Smith some very generous cover in all of this by sort of consulting him and giving Will Smith the ability to cite him in his speech. But I think also there is a kernel of truth in this sort of like, I'm not a religious person, but this idea of like, you know, you're at the very tippy top of something that you have climbed so hard and so long to get to the top of it. This is the moment actually probably where you are likeliest to dissolve. Absolutely. And for it to happen minutes before this thing that he has wanted for a very long time is, astonishing. Yeah. So I'm sure, I mean, we'll be breaking it down on probably every podcast on this
in the rest of time.
But this is just going to be it's not the Coda Oscars. Like the question was, is this going to be the Coda Oscars? Is it going to be the Power of the Dog Oscars? This is going to be the Will Smith Oscars, the way that, you know, you don't remember much that happened in the Moonlight Oscars except La La Land and Moonlight, you know, like that's it. And like, what's wild is we've been talking for weeks about Will Packer and ABC and Disney and all of their desire to give us a memorable show that everyone will be talking about, you know, and it's just like, I mean, I can confidently say they didn't mean it like this, but they, you know, they got their wish.
You could not have scripted it. You could not have. Yeah. And the truth is that through all of the machinations to try to improve the show, shorten the show, make the show seem younger, more viable, the only thing that was really going to boost the show was a moment, and a moment early enough in the show to meaningfully have people tune in. If you weren't watching the Oscars, you probably got a text message from someone that said, you should turn on the Oscars. Something crazy just happened, because something really crazy did just happen. And it wasn't just a single moment. It was one in which we had an almost instantaneous reaction from one of the key figures. So there's really just, it's so hard to wrap your head around this. The thing that Denzel said that, or the Will said that Denzel said to him was, at your highest moment, be careful. That's when the devil comes for you, which, you know, has the kind of elegance that we expect from Denzel. But I agree with you that there is something about seizing on Denzel's cover as kind of like this, you know, he is in many ways like the new Jack Nicholson. Clearly at this show, he is the person that people look to for advice and for grace, and he obviously gave Will a sense of grace in that moment. But I don't know. I feel fucked up about this. Honestly, I don't think it was great that he smacked a person. I don't think it was the greatest speech I've ever heard at a time. And I've obviously been rooting for Will Smith, and I don't want to sound like a scold, but I'm also kind of fearful of like a really long take cycle here around this. And we are, of course, as guilty as anybody around these things, but there will be takes from every direction, from protecting the sanctity and decency of your family's reputation, to acts of violence in public, to the notions of modern comedy. Like who knows? Like this really runs the gamut. It's kind of a hell pit, honestly, of all of the things that we fear in our culture, and it all came together at the same time. And I'm sure that's one thing that the producers of this show are bummed out about, is exactly what you said, which is like, this is the legacy of the show in so many ways.